Hello, countries A through Z, where they have communications with each other, they have collusions with each other. America has collusions putting fake transcripts in databases with the countries that Judge Napolitano covers all the time with his live streams, for example. Don't miss the live streams of my YouTube channel. And please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There are more World Trade Center predicate acts that are being covered up because people don't follow mandated law. They get away with it by pretending that we should call them or write a letter. But the agencies have wire and mail crime methods, including as World Trade Center predicate acts, because then they have to cover that. They have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, or readings of statutes and the precedents. Simultaneously, they have increasingly at countries A through Z self-valued roles with what no one self-values, like roles of the wars, and people, in other words, where they have no choice but to lie, or to use truths as lies, or to have a nature debate about the difference as collusion/S, where originally and still not one formal identity of law location was allowed to discern, accurately. Anyone who tried to communicate accurately about what's actually entrenched. What our founders communicated. They have our founders' communications replaced to us. Our founders communicated that, how, and why. They had to classify for themselves and for us to understand that, how, and why not one person had free speech. There was a breaching method entrenched. And it was partly because of how they had internationally monitored conversations. The difference of their guilt, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, originally and still. We're supposed to ask ourselves, why is there a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed Webb Stevens Museum, for example, regarding the founding locations in America? They have other communicator for our founders than they had, declassified for us to have communicated for those places and about for themselves. George Washington had to come to Webb House, again, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. He had to come there to counter-extort, partially because he was counter-extorted himself. And see, everyone, we were directed by George Washington to be honest about his extortion, because no one at the time had free speech, including George Washington, including once he was our first president. He was still extorted and counter-extorted. In fact, human nature enslaved, therefore physically. In other words, the nature of the debate regarding this and the comparisons, the breaching method forced roles with that sustained so could hide behind it through those comparisons. That's why and how we have the nature debate regarding black and white voices, the only ones allowed to be heard. Changing and faking what our founders communicated for us to communicate for black people's rights of eyes. And the breaching method, how it reassigned roles, speaking for how the breaching method, blaming other things other themselves with a breaching method force, which is roles, communicating other than nature communicates with black people's rights of eyes, when nature is not only itself as criminal insidiousness nature. Nature itself shows us. It wants us to discern where and how and when we are using systems, tactical ulterior from its own. It shows us the difference between positives like peace, the differences between positives that are criminal insidiousness natures of positives and ones that are also positive unto itself. There's a difference. So there's a need to discern a distinct nature of peace. For example, hyper peace is also positive unto itself always, otherwise we sense. At countries A through Z, if we pay attention, not one voice has been able to legitimately speak about how a breaching method reassigned black people's rights of eyes communications and rolls with it. Otherwise, that body was incensed. That's part of the reason why and how. They're speaking about the UN Charter with Alastair Crooke and Judge Napolitano, and they're leaving out and changing, and their sense and sensibilities. They don't even realize to the extent they're changing and faking what our founders communicated about the Charter Oak in Connecticut, for example. Why and how they had to hide a charter in an oak tree. Why and how they had to deal with internationally communications and databases and campuses in the republic for which we stand abridged. Still collusion still rolls with that breaching method that was entrenched, only allowed, fathomed the rolls. Northern colonies and southern colonies, slavery had been entrenched and sustained, and then America's founders were born. All those databases were criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. And that's important where and how people use information regarding the past with subject treatments. So Fox Connecticut News has roles with WFSB. WFSB faked conversations with me. But these are the sources in the intelligence at next to their location, but also at next to Fox Connecticut News. These are also the sources of WTNH and intelligence at next to their location, which is also FBI, involved all along Route 175 from founding locations in Old Wethersfield, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the three branches of government, intelligence ties to them, and the other countries the same way. Criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw, and used remotely that way, pretending other, screening and facilitating and exploiting a human fact, human nature breaching method. That's what you guys are doing when you make subject treatments about responses, non-responsive people's subject treatments proper regarding slavery. You guys can't afford it discerned. You are reliant upon logic, natures of logic, forcing, tricking, hurting, and persuading other things, others, ourselves, blame for what that caused, and the methods that were behind it, and the motivations and the natures of people behind it. That's all evidence. See, but you guys are dishonest with evidences. Originally, still also tactically delusions raw. That's why we have what nature communicates with black people's whites of eyes still replaced. And not one has traced and or relative to where and to how they sense us. Alastair Crooke used the phrase color revolution. In other words, we're supposed to have a color revolution. We're supposed to discern how it's actually recorded. As the voice is speaking for difference, religious differences, physical differences. They're speaking for differences, tactical ulterior. From that different, there's an identity of difference that shows a distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is different from the other species of the other identities of simultaneous nature, like species bodies of individual bodies, totally different individual species bodies, and they're made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. And that shows us that none of those species bodies, including our own, invented that. There's a distinct identity of value/value progression that all things are, but not, but anyway. So we can discern its body of value progression to an extent. It is functional how it is hyper invisible, but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible, but still discernible. The parts of speech of English and of modern languages, they were revealed to teach about this. The parts of speech are about the invisible, but still discernible. They are named, therefore, they're not hyper invisible, but still discernible. This takes the nature of contemplation to appreciate and to discern the body of the hyper invisible, but still discernible, like contemplating why and how, what we could discern relative with where and how and why. There are a whole bunch of different species bodies of individual bodies, and all group differences are actually how they are generated. In other words, so though Fox News has roles with intelligence next to them and or at their place, also involved with whiting forensics, also with attorneys generals, judges, prosecutors, their family members. A whole bunch of people with the state of Connecticut corrections offices and judicial branch offices in Connecticut also have organized crimes with name and organized crime acts and whole methods of them recorded. Also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, next to Fox Connecticut News. Where also they have the sense and sensibilities of Judge Napolitano through administrations since before he left Fox News, influenced by Fox News' roles with Facebook, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with Wethersfield Police, with New Britain Superior Court. A whole bunch of people tied to New Britain Superior Court have people named Cololo, Kerr, DeMora, Cullen, Aiello, involved with them. Rick Ciampaglione, Brian Silver, the name Christine, and how they only give one name. Some they don't give a whole full name. They switch names, interbranch switch names. So they have roles with Wethersfield Police too, with wire crime acts and methods where they just fake the phone transcripts. Wethersfield Police also faked me being at the police station and speaking with them as a kid and then as an adult. You need to get them on paper, one name and sequence. These are people before and after the World Trade Center attack involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Hartford Hospital has mail and wire crimes with Los Solido themed and other mafia themed and organized crimes groups themed and gangs. People involved with a Joshua Julian with the Facebook page of a principal upskirt nature, who I recorded involved with Joshua Julian and other people on my street involved with child abuses on and off the kids' campuses, identity theft, fraud, slanders. A bunch of people with the Leahy family. There's a bunch of people with medical doctors, and they rolled with EMS, the Hartford's triage, an institute living founded on the campus of Hartford Hospital in 1822, with slavery still entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies. Other is then and now still being communicated for our founders about how and why they were still entrenched with slavery in northern colonies and southern colonies. And that was just one of the subject treatments. There were other natures of organized crimes and criminal foreign influences at the same time juxtaposed with that, so they could keep subject treatments measured and maintained, entertained. So entertained, leaving out what's actually hyper simultaneously recorded and simultaneously recorded. And nature itself shows us needs to discern that distinct identity of simultaneous nature. So they refuse to identify themselves legitimately into branch, and they've been trying to make fake exceptions pretended into databases. On a mass scale, people came before courts that were only capable. No, the names of the people of the sciences individually grouped and together, they're a certain type of victim / hyper victim. And the breaching method uses that to measure and maintain their needs and natures to overcome that. Instead, showing how they need to to blame other things, others themselves, for why and how they have to defend that. Exactly as collusions against themselves. Right where and how no one wants collusions, except for where and how they have real motivations, like their kids, to pretend and use for the breaching, because the breaching method motivated them. That's why they have women judges involved with predicate acts with child offenders, kids, forcing them. Everyone's speaking through others, and that's why they won't get on paper. And the Britain Superior Court in the Britain, Connecticut has a bunch of people, excuse me, since I was a kid, with the locations and names next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, which is right next to the state capitol note. They've been roles with predicate acts intercities and with names that next to the campuses and or just temporary next to them. And the difference of that is exploited too. So FBI, state police, and Wethersfield Police with a whole bunch of different Connecticut police departments. They have wire and mail crimes in the same house /S, increasingly being brought up with them. That's why they can't get into paper, because otherwise is recorded about. And that's the value of how they raised the three branches of government and the intelligence tied to them and their family members. They have been raised, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, to keep them incapable of affording to be discerned, short words with convictions proper. So they're refusing to identify themselves legitimately into branch they're using and have used. They're threatening to use further. They're recording themselves using and threatening to use further wire crime acts and mail crime acts, and stacking predicate acts, fake transcripts and databases, collusions with all natures of crime scenes, including from the interbranch locations. The state of Connecticut corrections officers and judicial branch offices have roles with predicate acts methods at and next to campuses, and with their family members as adults and kids, where they have roles with maturity, words like maturity or immaturity, or adult. Recorded, used, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and the news at the same time, identity theft, fraud, stands with the interbranch. So please get them on paper, one name and sequence. And get me off the fake conversations with WFSB, and get them on paper with the multiple police departments, not just the Wethersfield Police Department. And with the FBI, you guys know you're playing games. You have a whole bunch of federal criminals as co-defendants, the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and their family members and their neighbors are involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes with the campuses, drugs and medicines crimes, with the family members of probate court judges involved with have people forced locked into elderly homes, forced mental evaluations at medical campuses, all kinds of organized crimes there. Increasingly, they have collusions with the judicial and corrections offices, though, and World Trade Center. The World Trade Center has the victims, collusions with the attackers on many levels, and with their lawyers. Lawyers all sides of criminal and civil cases, the courts, the police forums, interbranch family members, the conjunctions to them, they're putting in the news, they're putting the same sequence shifts, predicate acts with facts. Criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, rot, self-valued, uses of databases tied to information, uses of the validity of it, used dishonestly while pretending other. So in other words, please get them on paper, one name and sequence. Get me off of fake conversations with it, the news pretended with WFSB and with New Britain Superior Court. The Britain Superior Court and other courts of Connecticut and the state judicial branch office and corrections offices have some black KKK theme, Latino theme, Italian theme, roles in criminal enterprises, private ones, identity theft, fraud, slanders, sequence shifts, fake passions and emotions. They recorded this. That's why they were showing that they need to hide that by faking things. Whole methods they have recorded intercities. Whole bunch of people tied to Ray Collo and his father, Ray Collo, too. Increasingly with the Wethersfield Police refusing, and Newington Police Departments, Rock Hill Police Departments, refusing to identify themselves legitimately. New Britain Superior Court, New Britain's Central Connecticut State University has a bunch of people with the departments there, also tied to people on my street through time, like named O'Brien. There's a Ray, and there's an O'Brien. They only give one. Otherwise, it's a Ray O'Brien. But either way, there are multiple O'Briens and people with the name Collo, and more than one Ray Collo. Excuse me. Involved also with a Joe DeMoro, who confessed to the name Judge Napolitano involved. Joe DeMoro has a John DeMoro, brother, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids years apart. He had further roles with that, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And on Facebook with the FBI. And with some lost legal themes at and next to Hartford Hospital through time, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them. A bunch of people tied to a Fred Grouze and the uses of the name Joey Quest. Totally different people. Might be a son of a Joey Quest. A whole bunch of people tied to a Joey Quest I don't know at all, who have been tied to a Paul Apted, and his sister and family has roles with Hartford Hospital, with the intelligence community, and they're putting identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake transcripts, and databases. roles acting so others can take. There are proofs that they took a picture of me standing near a Paul Aptet years ago to put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. A Fred Grisey is one of the strangers that sought me out to make all kinds of confessions tied to that. And I never saw him with my neighbors, but increasingly he's recorded confessions, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with my neighbors. A whole bunch of people with Modern Pastry and Mazzucato Bakery involved with a Mayan family / families, involved with all kinds of sequence shifts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and educators of a Mayan family, involved with, a bunch of people in New Britain Superior Court. And their roles with predicate acts on my street from other areas with a bunch of people. And the same house involved with the Wethersfield police confessions, falsifying police reports when I was a kid, when I was an adult. They're putting me fake conversations with themselves, fake locations with themselves. You need to get them on paper, one name in sequence. They have people with the name Kalal and tomorrow have cousins. They both said they have a cousin named Scalora. They have cousins named Scalora, relatives named Scalora. A bunch of people with the name Scalora have been pretending to know me since I was a kid. They didn't even go to my schools. And they've been planting evidences with my neighbors at the campuses I went, even when I don't even know if they went to that campus, like Central Connecticut State University has a number of people tied to a Jamie Carone and other people with that last name and other last names involved with their educators too, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, their classmates. That's why there was 3 people in that class besides me, and I left it right away. They put my neighbor in there. I already recorded that involved with them with organized crimes. All kinds of and home break-ins, falsified police reports. That's why I got out of that class. There are people that are seating the kids in classes and looking where they're going to walk and who's going to see what, and involved with their identity theft, fraud, slanders, cover-up needs. They're incapable of making a proper subject treatment, let alone serious things. Boxings. I teach those things, but long. Get them to follow mandated law. Fix the fake World Trade Center predicate acts of WFSB. We're going to examine how they have roles with intelligence programs, like with programs in industries, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, out of their mind regarding the validity of their uses of words like terrorism, criminal enterprises, crimes, black people.